I went from thinking that there was absolutely nothing wrong with my son to suddenly being told that something is wrong with my son. And I had a really hard time adjusting to that and accepting that something was wrong with him, because I was like, these people are just nitpicking. They are not able to provide him the kind of support he needs, and then they are putting the blame on him. That is how I felt.
Just imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything that you thought you knew about yourself and your child is about to change. This is exactly what happened to Preeti when her son Rohan was diagnosed with autism. She had always seen Rohan as a happy, lively, and a well-adjusted child. However, the diagnosis challenged her perception and understanding of his needs in an unexpected way. But there's more to the story. At the age of 48, Preeti herself was diagnosed with autism. This revelation not only reshaped her understanding of her life, but also brought significant changes, finally allowing her to understand and help herself better. Throughout her life, Preeti constantly strived to meet people's expectations, never realizing that her challenges might be more intense. Although her diagnosis came late in life, it has provided relief, and she no longer feels inadequate but instead recognizes her own efforts and limitations. This podcast is truly unique because it captures Preeti's dual perspective, both as a mother fiercely advocating for her son Rohan and as an individual navigating her own late-in-life autism diagnosis. Her story shines a light on what it takes to challenge societal norms and embrace one's true self.
The thing is that it's very difficult for me to say whether I had a normal childhood or not, because my childhood is the only childhood that I know, really. And after that, it's my son's. So I would say it's just like everybody else's, probably. Except that I had issues with anxiety, and these issues became more obvious as I grew older. So I was with generalized anxiety disorder when I was 16 years old. I lived in Pune for a couple of years, and then I moved to Bangalore. One of the first times that I really had some kind of a challenge was when I switched schools. That was the first time when I felt very, very anxious to be in a new environment and to try and make new friends, because everybody was already friends with each other and I was the new kid on the block. And it was very difficult for me to integrate in the new school because the school environment was also so different. But other than that, I have, always been a very happy child, maybe a little anxious at times, but nothing that I personally felt or my parents ever felt that, there was something different about me. They just felt that I was a little sensitive, I was a little anxious, very particular about things. I had a small circle of friends. I was never never comfortable with a very big group of people. So I had a small circle of friends, but I always had one or two close friends growing up. In college also, I was pretty much like any other teenager, I think. And I got married when I was 21. So that was really early. I had my son when I was 26 years old. And we were in the US at the time. My son was born. But we started having a really difficult time managing with a baby. And he had a lot of challenges when he was a baby as well. So a lot of sleep issues and feeding issues, and just things were very, very difficult. So we moved back to India when he was 2 years old, and he was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. So that is really where our autism journey started. Before that, I had no idea what autism was, what it meant. My understanding of any kind of mental issues or psychological issues was that, there are people who have intellectual disability and there are people who don't. It was that basic. So when my son was diagnosed with autism, I really had no idea what it meant, and I was very, very shocked and taken aback, and did not even, agree that my son had anything that needed a diagnosis. So my journey started from there, and I can go on and on about it.
And what led you to, learn about Rohan's autism?
Okay, so what happened was Rohan always had a difficult childhood. He had delayed developmental milestones, which means he started walking late, he started speaking late. So one of the first signs that something was a little different about him was that he wasn't speaking until he was 3 years old. And but still I was not very alarmed, because I thought every child is different, and maybe he's a late speaker. But things came to a head when he started kindergarten, and what happened was he had a very difficult time in school, and that was really surprising because he was a very, very intelligent child. He had started reading when he was 2 years old, and by the age of 3 he could spell big, big words, and all of us thought that he is super smart. The play school that he went to was like, oh my god, your son is a genius. We can't believe that he can spell all these words. So the thing was that he wasn't speaking, but he could read and he could write. But when he started kindergarten and went into that setup, he was finding it very difficult. And so after about a month of kindergarten starting, I got a call from school asking us to come and meet the teacher and the principal. And I was like, oh my God, what's happened, Because we know that normally when you're called into school to meet the principal, it's like something is wrong. So we went to school, and the teacher and the principal sat down with us, and they told us that Rohan was having a lot of difficulty adjusting to the school. He was very anxious. He was very distressed. He was not comfortable with the other kids, and he was crying all the time. He couldn't stand the sound of the school bell ringing, and just like he was very, very disturbed in school. And this came as a really, really big surprise to me, because he seemed like such a well-adjusted child until then. He had had difficulty when we started play school, but he had settled down after about 15 days or so, because that was the first time that he was in an environment other than home. So I was like, okay, it's taking him some time to get used to this new environment. And also we had just moved down from the US. So I always felt that, okay, that was one of the reasons that he might have difficulty adjusting to a new environment. But the teacher and the principal they strongly suggested that we meet a psychologist, because they felt that something was wrong with Rohan, and that he probably needed some help, which if, once we met the psychologist would be able to guide us as to what kind of help he could be given. That is how we ended up going to a psychologist who diagnosed him with autism.
Rohan was an exceptional child when it come to his age, because he could read and he could write and he could spell certain difficult words. You said he would not speak.
So the way he would communicate with us was through gestures, and became so good at understanding those gestures because it was like, suppose he was hungry and he wanted to let me know that he was hungry, he would just, pull me to the kitchen. So I would know that, okay, he's hungry and he needs to eat. Or if he was sleepy, I would just make out from his body language, that, okay, he's sleepy. So it was like when he was a baby, when, babies can't speak, and you kind of guess what is wrong with them and what they need, and then you help them. I was doing that until he was 3 years old. And then he started speaking one word. So it was like, if he was hungry, he would say just hungry. Or if he was thirsty, he would just say thirsty. But he would not speak in sentences, or he would never call us by our, like mom or dad. He never called anybody by their whatever names, that you would call grandma, grandpa, nothing. So he was mostly very self-involved. He was always. I don't like to say that he was in his own world, because that has some very negative connotations now. Okay, no. So I don't want to say that. I would say that yeah, a very he was a very happy child, and he hardly cried. And it's like I was so used to meeting his needs, so used to reading his body language and meeting his needs, that it never really seemed like a that much of a big of a problem that he wasn't able to speak. Because even though he couldn't speak, he could communicate, and I could understand what he was communicating. It was only after he was diagnosed with autism that I said, okay, then I have to really work on his speech. Because back then, which is almost how many years back now, 15 years back, the way they treated autism was that you have to, fix the child. So it's like something is wrong with the child, and you have to work on the child, or, fix all the things that are wrong with the child. And so we were advised to do a couple of therapies, speech therapy, occupational therapy, to help him. And even though the speech therapy did not really help him that much, what I did was I started talking to him a lot. So whatever I would do during the day, whatever I was involved in, I would just do like a running commentary on the side. So if I was in the kitchen and I was cooking, I would tell him, okay, this is what I'm doing. Or any activity, I would explain it. It's like cricket commentary when, the cricket, the game is going on and the commentators are commenting on the side about what's happening. So I don't know whether it was because of that, or whether it was just that he finally reached a stage where he was able to speak. But when he was 5 years old, he was again speaking quite, on par with other kids his age.
So Rohan had difficulties speaking, which he caught up to at the age of 5.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are referring to the same child having exceptional reading and writing ability. How did that happen?
So this is part of being autistic, where children have difficulty with speech. A lot of kids never speak, they have issues with the vocal cords, or other issues where they are unable to make words, unable to have speech. But that doesn't mean that they are not able to think, or they are not able to, articulate themselves in some form. Speech is just one aspect of communication. There are so many aspects of communication, and there are so many ways of communicating. So Rohan would communicate in writing. A lot of times he would just write what he was feeling, or like I was saying, through gestures. So there is something called hyperlexia, which some kids with autism have, where they are able to, they have a really good command on the language. They are able to read and they are able to write. But because of whatever issues, they are not able to speak.
When you all were asked, principal of the school that Rohan was in, to go and meet the psychologist, what happened when you visited the psychologist?
So we went, when we went to the psychologist took him in to a room, and she did some kind of assessment, which went on for a very long time actually, which involved some activities, and he was asked to do some stuff like sorting out puzzles and such kind of things. And at the end of it, we were called in and told that he has autism. So it was, that simple. There was nothing more to it. And then so we came out of the psychologist's clinic with a diagnosis of autism, and we did not know what to do after that. because there was no information given to us. Nobody explained to us what autism was. We were left to do all of that on our own. And 15 years back, it was so difficult to find information on autism because we did not have the kind of information that we have now, now because of the internet, and because there's such easy access to information on the internet. Also, there are parent support groups, and just information is a lot more easily available. It wasn't like that back then. So after we met the psychologist, we talked to our pediatrician and told her that this is, what has happened, that the psychologist has diagnosed him with autism, and what do we do now? We are completely lost. We don't know what to do. The pediatrician then asked us to meet a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist again assessed him and confirmed the diagnosis. And she was the one who directed us to do therapies. She said autism is a lifelong condition, but therapies will help him cope with, day-to-day life, and help him overcome whatever challenges he has. So you should start doing those. And the therapies that we were supposed to do were speech therapy, because he wasn't speaking. So speech therapy to help him speak. And occupational therapy because he had sensory issues. He had motor coordination issues. So to help him, for example, something like being able to eat on his own, or being able to jump. He couldn't jump, or to be able to skip. And sensory issues where, in retrospect now, we could make out that one of the sensory issues that he had was with texture. So the reason we had such a difficult time with feeding when he was a baby was because of his issues with texture, and the texture of the food that he couldn't stand. So when we switched him from liquids to solids, he had a very difficult time trying to, swallow the solids. And now we knew that the reason for that was because he has sensory issues. So occupational therapy was supposed to help him with all of that. We continued speech therapy for a couple of months and then stopped it because he seemed very, very uncomfortable in that session. And he was crying and he was quite distressed. So I didn't, feel comfortable continuing with that. But occupational therapy was something which, after the initial hiccups, where it was a new environment, he was quite overwhelmed because he did not know what was happening, and suddenly he's in this new place and all these new things he's supposed to do. After that, he started enjoying occupational therapy quite a lot. It was like almost like a playtime for him. And we were lucky to have occupational therapists who made sure that the therapy sessions did not seem like work, but seemed like play and something that my son looked forward to and enjoyed. I feel that is something that did help him a lot with his motor coordination and sensory issues, and helped him to develop life skills, learn self-help skills. So that is how the first couple of years after the diagnosis went, doing therapies and, helping him reach the milestones that kids his age would reach naturally. But for Rohan with an autism diagnosis, we needed to put in extra effort to help him get there, to help him meet the same milestones as the other kids.
How has raising Rohan evolved you as a person?
Oh, so much, so much. For me, I would say the journey was the reverse, in the sense I went from thinking that there was absolutely nothing wrong with my son to suddenly being told that something is wrong with my son. And I had a really hard time adjusting to that and accepting that something was wrong with him, because I was like, these people are just nitpicking, they are not able to provide him the kind of support he needs, and then they are putting the blame on him. That is how I felt. Because at home he was perfectly fine. He did not have any of these issues that the teacher said he was having in school. So I really could not understand where all these issues were coming from. But since we had a psychologist telling us, we had a psychiatrist telling us that he had autism, then I had no choice but to kind of, accept the diagnosis. But as I read more about autism and the kind of support that he would need, growing up, I think one of the first things that I myself have always been like this, where I'm not a conformist, I have always been a non-conformist, and I have always questioned societal norms, and I have always questioned why we are supposed to do the things we are supposed to do. And so with Rohan being autistic, we were thrown out of that conventional setup even more. And I would say that my husband probably had a more difficult time adjusting to that than I did. I was like I had always been like a rebel. I stood behind Rohan very strongly. I made sure that he had a good childhood, that it was not just filled with therapies and going to the doctors and things like that. Or, I never saw him as somebody who was broken or that there was something wrong with him. I always considered him a healthy, well-adjusted child, and somebody who, I have raised before the autism diagnosis. I had a really good bond with him. So we just continued as we were in that sense. I became very protective about him. I made sure that I advocated a lot for him. But some of the things that I realized with Rohan being autistic was that the school environment, the social environment was very unsuitable for an autistic person. And in fact, that was one of the first times that I reflected back on my own childhood and remembered how difficult I had found school. So I had excelled academically, but I had not enjoyed school at all. And I felt that that is how it was for everybody. But then seeing Rohan struggle in school, and, I could relate so much to that. So in fact, the biggest impact that Rohan's autism diagnosis had on me is after years of seeing of Rohan trying to survive in this environment which is not suitable for an autistic person. I started empathizing a lot with the things that he was struggling with, and realized that I had a lot of the same struggles growing up. So the childhood that I felt was very struggle free and a very happy childhood. In retrospect, I started realizing that I had had all these challenges and that not everybody has these challenges. So one of the biggest realizations for me because of Rohan was that I might be autistic myself. And it also gave me a new perspective on life, and how to live. Although I had always been a non-conformist, it solidified even more after Rohan's diagnosis and after raising Rohan, because it was even more obvious for him that it was difficult for him to conform to the standards that have been set by society.
Was there a particular situation which led you to, think that you were autistic?
It's been a gradual journey, I think. Watching Rohan grow up and go through the things that he has gone through, and being able to relate to that, and realizing that my husband or other people are not able to relate to it, is something which made me think that, why is it that I feel that all these struggles are, very easy for me to understand, but others are finding it so hard to understand. So it was kind of like, for the longest time, I was the only person who could understand Rohan, and others were finding it very difficult to understand him. We had the same issues between my husband and me, where he felt I was a lot like Rohan, And so he always said, that Rohan is just like you, or you are just like Rohan, and you have the same issues. And so it was always a joke, like, mother and son are both, they are of the same type or whatever. But it
But I was just about to ask Preeti, see, isn't it normal for people to say, just mother, like son, like father, like daughter? So, it's very, very common, these terminologies. Yeah.
So I think in this case, somewhere down the road, it struck me that if people are saying like mother, like son, and if my son is diagnosed with autism, then could it be that if I'm like him, then I might be autistic as well? Because I have a lot of the same challenges, and I can really, really empathize with him, whereas nobody else is able to empathize with him or relate to him. So, with my background with anxiety, and having also gone through depression after Rohan's diagnosis, I was already, on psychiatric medications for that. And I felt that the more I read about autism in adults, so about 2 years back, when I actually sought an assessment, what happened was I was again going through burnout, which is, later I identified as a burnout. But so I have always been overwhelmed by things which people who are not autistic don't seem to be overwhelmed by. But I always thought that that is just the way I was. But slowly, as I started reading about autism in adults, and especially about autism in women, and I could relate so much to the experiences of these autistic women who were diagnosed early, women who were diagnosed late, how, they had severe anxiety, how they had gone through depression, how they had experienced burnout, and all the other issues that they were facing, difficulty. So even though I speak very well or I communicate very well, I find it very difficult to understand indirect communication. So in a group of people, if people are not direct, if people don't tell me what they mean directly, and if, there's all this indirect communication going on where people are implying things, I will not understand that. So for the longest time growing up, I have always felt so out of place in groups, whether it was as a child or an adolescent or as an adult. And I could not understand when people made, jokes, or when people were making fun of me or teasing me. And people seemed to find me kind of quirky, I think, and would make fun of certain things like, oh, they thought I was very naive. They thought I was very easy to fool because I believed whatever anybody said and things like that. So as a child, and especially as an adolescent, I was teased a lot by the other kids. They felt that I was very naive, and so they would, come and tell me things, and then I would believe that, and then they would all start laughing because they were like, how can she believe, this is so ridiculous, things like that. So all these things came to a head, and I thought they matched what I had come to know of autism, what I had come to know about being autistic, what it's like to be autistic, what are the challenges that autistic people face, what are the traits, what are the different characteristics. So I said that I was pretty convinced that I was autistic by that point. And I told my husband, I think I want to get myself assessed, because even though I feel that I am autistic, I actually want a formal diagnosis to make sure that I am autistic, or if I'm not, then I'm not. But I don't want to keep wondering, and I don't want to keep doubting myself. And also, since I have some mental health challenges, I have some physical challenges, similar to Rohan, a lot of difficulty with motor coordination, very clumsy, never good at sports, lot of sensory issues. So really high sensitivity to texture and to sound, but never really thought too much about it, which is why I think it all just came together. And I said, if I find out, that I'm autistic, then it might help me help myself. I might be able to help myself better, the way I have helped Rohan all these years. I think then I could do that for myself. And without that, I think without knowing that, I'm not able to support myself the way I need to be supported. Of course, I don't, expect that I could have been diagnosed with autism as a child, because that would have been so long back that I don't think that autism was even recognized in India back then. So back then, the understanding was, that the child is mentally retarded or the child is normal. I think it was just limited to that, and it would not have been possible for me to be diagnosed back then. Also, like I said, my struggles were not as obvious as are with some others. So it could have easily been missed as a child. Moreover, it's very difficult to identify autism in girls, because whatever criteria for diagnosis that exist are mostly catering to boys. So the diagnostic criteria for autism are so tailored to boys, young boys, that even girls miss out on being diagnosed. Even today, you can completely forget about it being diagnosed in adult women, because it's even now the understanding of autism is so limited that a lot of people still consider autism a childhood disorder. They think that it is something that only children have, that only children can be diagnosed with, and that they probably grow out of it. This is what my understanding of autism was when my son was diagnosed with autism, that okay, he's going to grow out of it with therapies and with whatever support we give him. He's eventually going to grow out of it, and then he's going to be autism free. It's only now that we have that much awareness, with more and more autistic adults speaking up and talking about their experiences about being autistic, that shift has started, where people have started realizing, oh, this is something which is lifelong. So it's not like it's going to go away. It's not like an autistic child is suddenly going to become a non-autistic adult. An autistic child is going to be an autistic adult, is going to be an autistic senior citizen, is going to be autistic till they die, basically. So something you're born with and something you die with. When I approached my psychiatrist, she was like, I don't know, maybe you might have something else. Maybe you have borderline personality disorder. Maybe you have obsessive compulsive disorder. Maybe you have bipolar disorder. But I don't know. I don't think this is how autism presents in adults. The thing is, nobody has an idea about how autism presents in adults, because the people my age were never diagnosed with it. The diagnosis of autism has started happening very recently in children as well. There is no example of an autistic adult for people to refer to. Luckily, to have an organization which actually assesses autism in adults it's almost unbelievable. But so I approached them, and then they did an assessment, which it was an online assessment, which spanned over 5 weeks. So we had one session per week, which consisted of them interviewing me. Then they interviewed my husband, they interviewed my parents, and they got an overview of me as a child, as an adult, from myself and from those who are closest to me. And I had to fill these like really long questionnaires of different multiple choice questions. At the end of this whole process, which lasted about 5 weeks, I was then told that I have autism, that I am on the spectrum.
What does it mean to say that you were on spectrum?
So autism is a spectrum. The severity of challenges that autistic people face are on a spectrum, from people who have very high support needs, to people who have medium support needs, to people who have low support needs. So I fall under the category of people who have low support needs, because I'm able to take care of myself quite well. I'm quite independent. I'm quite capable of managing day-to-day things. But there are a lot of autistics who are not. There are autistics who are, like I said earlier, non-speaking, some who never speak. So we have a different set of challenges. But what kind of binds us all together are challenges with communication, whether it is social communication, like I was talking about. I couldn't understand indirect communication. I can't read between the lines. I don't know when somebody is implying something. So issues with social communication or with speech, or we have very rigid patterns of thinking, and we have sensory issues. A lot of us have sensory issues. So there are some common traits that bind us all together, but on a day-to-day basis, the challenges that we face can vary a lot. So which is why it's called a spectrum. And we have different degree of challenges in different areas. So for example, somebody who is a non-speaker may not have that many sensory issues, but somebody who is a speaker may have really severe sensory issues. So the kind of support the two individuals need would vary.
Tell me a little bit more, because it's got me a little inquisitive as to how can a test be gender biased. So that would be very helpful.
So if you think about autistic traits, the kind of autistic traits that are present in boys are the diagnostic criteria are based on. For example, one of the criteria or one of the traits that is often mentioned is that children tend to line things up. So they tend to line up their toys, or they tend to line up whatever, things they're playing with. They have a different way of playing. They are always in their own world, or that they don't make eye contact. These are things which are not as visible in girls as they are in boys, especially in women. I think I will talk about it more as they grow older. As children also, the things that are observed in the kind of behavior that they observe to diagnose autism inherently is more catered to boys than it is to girls. Girls are inherently shy. Girls may not have the kind of play that boys have. So how do you really identify autism in girls, So a lot of times when a boy is diagnosed with autism, a girl will just be labeled as being shy, being introverted, being quiet, whereas the boy would get an autism diagnosis.
This is a moment of revelation, Preeti.
Yeah.
In the entire conversation, amongst the others, this is absolutely, baffling. Are there any examples, if you can recollect, from the diagnosis when you were trying to take it? You felt that, just some very obvious things that came to you that highlighted that, this falls, this gender bias test.
I think more than the questions, what the people who are assessing expect. If you see the diagnosis of autism, it's based on somebody's observation of the autistic person's behavior. It is a behavioral diagnosis. It's not based on the autistic person's experience of being autistic. It's based on the observer's observation of an autistic person and how they behave, which are vastly two different things. They are so separate from each other. So what happens now in a situation like mine, or for a lot of girls inherently are better at imitating others, at mimicking others' behaviors. So an autistic boy might really stand out in a group of children because of his behavior or the type of behavior that he shows. But an autistic girl may, seem quiet, may seem shy, or, may even be very, very extroverted, may seem very extroverted and very outgoing as well, because she has learned to, what we say, mask. She has acquired these behaviors by observing them in the children around her, and which is exactly what I have done. And so I can really relate to this, because, very early on, I realized that I was different from others. I felt different from others. I could not connect with other kids. And I always felt like I was, on the outside of the group looking in. And it was very curious for me, the kind of things that kids did, or the things that they like doing. And I could never really understand why, for example, girls played with dolls. Being a girl, people brought me dolls and I hated dolls. I was actually really scared of dolls because I found them so scary. I was like, I don't know whether you've seen this movie called Child's Play, but later on when I saw that movie, I was like, okay, so I'm not the only one who finds dolls scary. But as a child, I was expected, for example, being a girl to play with dolls, but I did not like playing with dolls, and I found it really, really curious that my friends or my friends who were girls would, feed these dolls and dress up these dolls, and I would be like, this is, so weird. Don't these people know that these dolls are not real, that they don't really get hungry, or, they don't need to be fed and clothed and everything? And so I just did not understand what was, enjoyable about that whole process. I much preferred playing with Legos. I preferred, playing with construction toys. I preferred painting, coloring, and such activities. Playing in the sand, building things with the sand, for example, playing in the mud and digging up the mud and looking at worms and all that. So my friends, in retrospect, probably found me really weird, but it was the same for me. So unless they have like really very obvious autistic behaviors, like they are, I don't know whether you know about stimming. It's like a lot of autistics engage in these repetitive motions, which we call stimming. So unless there is like very obvious stimming behavior, or the girl is not making eye contact, or she's not interacting with anybody at all, unless it's very obvious, girls tend to miss out being diagnosed because they kind of merge with the crowd, are good at merging with the crowd. And so as an adult, if you see me, or if you hear me speak also, I don't think people can really make out that I'm autistic. When I was diagnosed with autism, I asked my friends, did you ever feel that, there was something different about me? And my friends, the ones who are close to me, said, yeah, we always thought you were weird, but that's just the way you are, that's just how you are. That's what we thought, that is just how you are. So I was like, okay, how long have you thought that I'm weird? And, all these years you never told me that I was weird. So certain behaviors, I guess, even after learning to merge with the crowd and learning the behavior, picking up on others' behaviors, and what's acceptable and what's not, still, the some of the weirdness still slips through.
While growing up with the so-called label of being a normal childhood, a normal upbringing,
Yes.
so coming to a point where you had this report that officially confirmed that you were autistic, what difference did that make to you as an individual?
I think the biggest difference that has made is that I have finally started learning how to help myself. I have, ever since I was a child, tried so hard to meet people's expectations, tried so hard, whether be it in school or be it at home. And I felt that everybody was having to struggle so much to meet these expectations, be it, being good at academics, or be it being good at sports, or just, having friends, and even small things like doing your homework. I had so many challenges, and I felt that everybody had these challenges and still they were performing well. I never realized that I might be having more challenges, and that is why it's, harder for me to do something. So I was very hard on myself growing up. I was very hard on myself after I got married, and, I had to meet all these expectations, and including social expectations, and I just could not. And I always felt like I was not enough. Either I was not enough or I was too much. Either, oh, she's not strong enough, she's not resilient enough, she's not tough enough. Or it was that, oh, she's too sensitive, she's too emotional, she's too much of everything. So I've always felt either like I was either too much or too little, not enough. My self-esteem has been hit so badly because of that, because of not being able to live up to people's expectations, and something which everybody else can do so easily. I find it so hard to do. Even something like a job, I have tried to do a job so many times as an adult, and I have always ended up failing. The challenges that I face, I never got accommodations for those. So the biggest difference that my diagnosis has made is that I finally have started looking at my support needs. I have started identifying my support needs. I have, stopped thinking that this is how it is for everybody and they are still managing with all these challenges. I have started identifying that, okay, this is a challenge that I have, and this is the kind of support I need to be able to manage with this challenge that I have. So it has been so relieving for me to be diagnosed with autism, because I finally don't feel like I'm not trying hard enough. I finally feel like I have always done my best. I have done more than my best, growing up and as an adult. But it's just never been enough, because I was trying to do all that while managing all the challenges that I have. And so now I have become more compassionate towards myself. I have become more accepting of my limitations. I'm like, okay, you did your best with whatever you have. That has been the biggest difference.
Preeti, in this journey, how has your relationship with your dear ones, people who matter to you, evolved?
Another big impact that being diagnosed with autism has had is on my relationship with my husband, because we've been married for 26 years, and all these years we have had so many struggles as a couple, trying to understand each other, trying to communicate with each other, and always felt like we were just not able to understand each other. My husband, being non-autistic, and he's from a very, very conventional background. He's from one of those high performing backgrounds where he's an IITian, and he's a software engineer, and so he's all that conventional success defines. And I'm so not like that. So it's been very hard for my husband to understand why I find it difficult to do things which people can do very easily. There was no diagnosis. He always felt that I was not trying hard enough, or I was just being too much or too little, like I said. But after finding out that I'm autistic, it suddenly clicked for him. It suddenly now makes so much sense to him, and so he is able to be compassionate towards me. He is able to give me that benefit of doubt, where if I say that I find something hard, then he knows that yes, you really do, or he's there to support me for that, instead of feeling ki, "Arey, why can't you do something so simple or so little?" So it has really changed the way he understands me, or the way he appreciates me. He now feels very proud of me and the way I have overcome my challenges, and lived my life with the challenges that I have. So I would say that the autism diagnosis has changed my relationships with people for the better. It has also helped me make peace with a lot of unresolved emotions that I had, where I did not understand why people were not being kind to me, or I did not understand why people were being so harsh, why they were judging me so much, or why they weren't understanding what I was trying to say. There is something that we call the double empathy problem. So between autistic and non-autistic people, since they have different ways of communicating, it's like, the communication gap is from both ways. It's not just that the autistic person doesn't understand what the non-autistic people are trying to say, but non-autistic people don't understand what the autistic person is trying to say. So this communication gap, my husband and I have finally managed to bridge. And that has been really very good. That has strengthened our relationship so much.
How do you ensure that you self-advocate for the need and support that you require as an autistic adult?
So right now I'm just advocating for myself at home, I think. Everywhere else, I have not really, had the courage to advocate for myself so much. I have been a very strong advocate for my son over the years. The one of the things which I have realized after my own diagnosis is that I find it very difficult to ask for help myself. I have always felt that asking for help was a sign of weakness, of me not being good enough. So I am just learning to advocate for myself. I've started doing it at home with my husband, where I express my needs and what kind of help I need at any moment. I have just decided to work with an organization, and they know that I'm autistic, and they are going to work with me on helping me adjust to working in a professional environment. So I don't know how that's going to go, but yeah, that's something that I'll have to see now if I'm able to advocate for myself.
So what I understand is you finished your education and you always found it difficult to fit into a corporate environment or working atmosphere.
Yes.
Would you be comfortable talking about that experience to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have background in English literature. I have done my BA in English literature, and I tried to complete my MA in English literature, but I left after a year because that was the, I think, first time where I started facing these challenges related to being autistic. I could not, I was married at the time, and I could not manage my home responsibilities and my education at the same time. So I ended up quitting halfway. So I have tried to work as a content writer and a content editor a couple of times throughout the last so many years. And it was always too heavy for me, too heavy. So the two times that I tried to do a job, I could manage for 2 months. I somehow managed for 2 months, and I just could not. I was completely burned out by the end of it because, first of all, trying to work for 8 hours a day, there's a lot of cognitive stress also. So for me to be able to write for 8 hours a day every day of the week, it was just very, very hard. My mind was completely blank by the end of 2 months. So I don't really know how to explain the difficulty that I had, and I could not understand office politics, and I just ended up, being misunderstood and probably misunderstanding others. So much of the communication used to be indirect, and I never knew how to express my needs even then, so I would give all of myself. I felt like if somebody tells me to do something, I have to do it, and I have to do it to the best of my ability. And if I'm not able to do it, then, I'm a complete failure. So a lot of self-pressure. And my husband used to tell me, you can just talk to your boss and tell them that you're not able to do this within this time or whatever, and they will understand. But I was like, no, they have told me that I have to do this. So very literal thinking on my part, which is something that I always struggle with. I take things extremely literally. So if somebody tells me that they need me to do something in 5 minutes, I will literally try to do it in 5 minutes, even though it's impossible to do it in 5 minutes. I'm so meticulous. So one of the things which I found difficult during these stints was my meticulousness was getting in the way of me finishing tasks, so I was finding it very hard to meet deadlines, finding it very, very hard, because the kind of quality that I expected from myself was so much. And again, I just did not know how to do a mediocre job. I was like, I have to do my best. And so for my definition of doing my best was just too extreme, I think. It was not required in the job that I was doing. Even I don't think my bosses would have said anything if I had not met those expectations which I had kept from myself. But it's very difficult to be practical, I think. I don't know. Very difficult to understand what people expect, and just I don't know how to explain. Yeah, I used to feel so overwhelmed, and it's like everything would start getting to me. I couldn't multitask at all. I find it extremely difficult to multitask. So if I'm doing one thing and then suddenly, somebody comes and asks me to do something else, I'll be so flustered, so flustered that, I will end up just sitting there and not doing anything. And it's like my mind goes blank. So I have to do one thing at a time and I have to be focused. I should not be disturbed or I lose my train of thought. And once I've lost my train of thought, it's very difficult for me to get back to where I was. And so time management again was something which I found very difficult. I couldn't make out, so I would be sitting in the office after hours trying to complete the work, because again I was being so meticulous and trying to perfect whatever I had written.
What are the common myths about autism that you'd like to debunk?
One of the first things that I would like to clear, first of all, is that autism exists in adults. Unlike what a lot of people think, that autism is a childhood condition, that's not true. It's a lifelong condition. So an autistic child will be an autistic adult, will be an autistic senior citizen. So the first thing I think like to clear is that autism exists in adults and in women. So it's not limited to just men, but it's equally common in women. The second thing is that people feel that autistic people don't like to socialize. That's not true. There are a lot of autistic people who like to socialize. Just like there are a lot of autistic people who may not like to socialize, or may like to socialize only part of the time. So it's just like with non-autistics, where some people are love to socialize, some people don't like to socialize so much, some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. It's the same with autistic people. It's no different. It's just that socialization can take a lot out of autistic people. So because of difficulty with communication, because of difficulty understanding social communication, because of sensory issues and things like that, it's not true that if a person likes to socialize, then that person is not autistic. The person can be autistic and still like to socialize. Another myth I think I would like to address, that autistic people are not capable of leading an independent life. That's not true at all. Autistic people can definitely lead independent lives, but they may need more support and accommodations to do so. These are the three main things.
A lot of times, even well-meaning people aren't aware of how to conduct themselves around an autistic person or their family. What do you think would be a good starting point for them?
Just be normal, just be normal. You don't have to do anything different or treat an autistic person or their family any differently. We are just like anybody else. One thing that would help an autistic person is if you speak directly to them, Don't engage in indirect communication, because that is difficult for us to understand. So keep it simple, be clear about what you're saying. Don't engage in implications and implying things and things like that. Also, don't infantilize the person. So if you're talking to an autistic adult, speak to him as if he's an adult. Don't talk to him as if he's a child who doesn't understand what you're saying, because that's not the case. So I think the main thing I would say is just be normal. Just interact with us the way you would with anybody else. Just make sure that your communication is simple and direct and clear, because that is something we might not understand. But other than that, there's nothing specific that I would say.
And this wraps up our podcast with Preeti. A remarkable journey teaches us that everyone is unique and their needs are unique. Being neurodivergent is just another way of living. Preeti's later life autism diagnosis profoundly transformed her relationships. Her diagnosis brought peace to unresolved emotions, highlighting the double empathy problem and shows the importance of recognizing differences to build supportive relationships. Preeti's advocacy for herself and her son teaches us the power of self-compassion and acceptance. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. Like, comment, and subscribe to the Human Collab's YouTube channel and the other social media handles mentioned in the description below. Together, let's foster a community where strength and compassion thrive.